What's up, guys? Today we'll be talking about the circulatory system in animals and the flow of blood. The circulatory system is made of three major components: the heart, blood vessels, and circulatory fluid. Before we begin, let's talk about arteries and veins. It's important to remember that arteries always carries blood away from the heart, and veins always carries blood towards the heart. Now, whether this blood is either oxygenated or deoxygenated is dependent on the blood's location in the circulatory system. In addition, arteries contain significantly more smooth muscle than veins. This allows the arteries to dilate and contract, while veins contain valves, which prevents the backflow of blood, which arteries do not have. Take a look at the following chart that compares the two. For the purpose of the exam, I like to draw the following diagram to track the flow of blood to determine whether the blood is oxygenated or deoxygenated. This is especially useful for the exam if the professor asks for the flow of blood starting from a point you're not familiar with. Feel free to pause the video and follow along. I start by drawing a square box and dividing it into 4 quadrants, representing the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. From there, I will complete the systemic and pulmonary circulations. The systemic circulations includes your aorta, your arteries, your arterioles, your capillaries, your venules, your veins, and then finally, your inferior vena cava. Which is the large vein that returns blood back to the right atrium of the heart. While the pulmonary circulation includes your pulmonary artery, your lungs, and then finally, your pulmonary vein. Next, I will label my box with the different valves that connects the components of the circulatory system together. The tricuspid valve, also known as the right atrioventricular valve, connects the right atrium to the right ventricle, while the mitral valve, also known as the left atrioventricular valve, and the bicuspid valve connects the left atrium to the left ventricle. To distinguish the two, I like to remember the R in tricuspid helps me remember it's on the right side, while the L in mitral helps me remember it's on the left side. The pulmonary semilunar valve connects the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery, while the aortic semilunar valve connects the left ventricle to the aorta. And that's our diagram. When tracking the status of our blood, deoxygenated blood will be represented by a blue pen, and oxygenated blood will be represented by a red pen. Let's remember that arteries carries blood away from the heart, while veins carry blood towards the heart. Blood will continue to flow through the circulatory system as either oxygenated or deoxygenated blood until it reaches the lungs or capillaries, where it will either become oxygenated or deoxygenated. We will start at the right atrium, where the blood is deoxygenated. Blood moves from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve during the diastolic phase of a heartbeat, where the ventricles relaxed, atriums contracted, and blood fills the ventricle. This phase also makes the lub sound we hear in a heartbeat, which is caused by the closing of the tricuspid and mitral valves. From there, blood moves from the right ventricle through the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary artery, through the systolic phase of the heartbeat. Where the right ventricle is contracted, the blood is pumped out of the ventricles. This phase also makes the dub sound we hear in a heartbeat, which is caused by the closing of the pulmonary semilunar valve. Let's remember that arteries carries blood away from the heart, and the pulmonary artery is no exception. From there, blood is transported through the lung, which oxygenates our blood. At this point, we can change our pen color from blue to red. Now that the blood is oxygenated, it returns to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. Remember that veins carries blood back to the heart, and the pulmonary vein is no exception. Through the diastolic phase, blood is pumped from the left atrium to the left ventricle through the mitral valve. And through the systolic phase, blood is pumped from the left ventricle through the aortic semilunar valve to the aorta. The aorta pumps blood to systemic arteries. Again, the arteries carry blood away from the heart, but this time the blood is oxygenated. The arteries branch into smaller arterioles, and the blood moves towards the capillaries. At the capillaries, oxygenated blood becomes deoxygenated, and we can change our marker color from red to blue. The blood returns back to the heart via the venules, which branch off into veins. And remember, veins carry blood back to the heart, but this time the blood is deoxygenated. The systemic veins converge into the inferior vena cava, which is a large vein that transfers the deoxygenated blood back to the right atrium, and thus completes our circulatory system.
The Teaching Center, UF's Learning Resource Center.